Every so often you run into little things that make you think the country's changing for the better, even if it's just by inches, one little tiny bit at a time. I learned recently about the book that we're going to read today. It's Ramadan, Curious George, in which Curious George helps support his friend Kareem in Kareem's first fast for the Muslim month of Ramadan. And they make gift baskets to donate to the needy, and then they all join the man in the yellow hat to watch for the new moon and celebrate Eid together, the holiday ending the month. Come here, buddy. You can't bump the tripod. You're not allowed to bump the tripod. When the Jewish immigrant side of my family arrived in this country about a century ago, this was a country of profound anti-Semitism. There were Jewish quotas at universities. There was open hostility in the workplace. This was a country that either said, as Jews, you needed to be segregated, or you needed to erase your identity in the name of assimilation. You needed to stop being noticeably different from anyone else, which means the white Protestants around you. Now, it's not as if 100 years later, everything is all better now, but we have a chance not to make the same mistakes. And bit by bit, we're doing things differently in the generation of kids and adults who are coming up now. I'm so glad that my kids are growing up with Muslim friends and neighbors. So glad for the presence of Muslims in my life and in my neighborhood and in the nation. And happy to see Ramadan weaving into the fabric of the culture like this. That to be American, to live here, doesn't mean that you have to hide your faith or get rid of your culture. That's not a requirement for citizenship, for residency. We don't have to be a melting pot nation where everything boils away to nothingness. We can be a potluck nation where we're all together and where we're all unique. It's Ramadan, Curious George, isn't a sign of having arrived at some kind of better world, or that the work is done, or that awful things aren't happening on a daily basis to Muslims in this country. Ramadan starts this week for our Muslim neighbors. And this is a sign, just a little one, that things can shift for the better, even just by inches at a time, even just bit by bit. And we who aren't Muslim have the opportunity to learn and to get to know our neighbors. It's Ramadan, Curious George. George can't wait for tomorrow when the month of Ramadan will start. It's a special time of year for his friends, and George is going to take part. George and Kareem are so busy helping to cook and bake sweets, with a good little monkey joining in. Soon there's a big pile of treats. Kareem is going to try fasting, a day without food or drinks. George is curious, can Kareem do it? He needs some help, George thinks. So kids aren't required to fast, but as you get older, bit by bit, you try more. And this year, for the first time, Kareem is going to try fasting from sunrise to sunset, the whole day without food, without water, just like adults do when they're healthy and able to. The day of fasting. George is asleep in his bed when Kareem's alarm begins to beep. Kareem wakes up for an early meal, though the sun is still fast asleep. He's got to have his morning meal before the sun comes up. Later, when it's lunchtime, Kareem reaches for a piece of bread. Wait, no food until sundown. George will keep him busy instead. What's this sound George is hearing? It is a rumbling from Kareem's tummy. George drags him away from the kitchen. Whatever's cooking smells yummy. Everyone gathers together as the sun begins to set. The minutes tick by slowly. It still isn't dark enough yet. Finally, it's time to break fast. Not breakfast, to break fast. Kareem snacks on a sweet date. That's a traditional way of breaking the fast. First with a date. Then he takes a big gulp of milk as George loads more treats on his plate. "I did it, George," cheers Kareem. George nods. He's glad to be there. The room is filled with happiness and the peaceful sound of prayer. Now it's time to eat dinner. The spread on the table looks great with something special for everyone. This meal was well worth the wait. Look at all the great choices: kebabs, curries, veggies, rice. George spots a big pizza and takes a hot, cheesy slice. So in different communities around the world, people have different practices around food. So some of these are the different specialties, the different foods that you might eat depending on where your family came from. Now that the meal is over, the best treat has been saved for last: chocolate-dipped bananas to celebrate Kareem's first fast. Kareem invites George to the mosque. They gather to do a good deed. That's part of what you do during Ramadan. It's important to do good deeds. Together, they make food baskets to share with others in need. Wow, look at George joining the action. He knows how to lend a hand, maybe. And when he spies a shelf full of shoes, George comes up with a plan. The thing is, when you go into a mosque, you take off your shoes. George has found the shelves where everyone's shoes are that they took off before coming in. "No, George," the imam says with a laugh. "Those shoes belong to us here, but you gave me a great idea. We'll add a clothes drive next year." Spotting the moon. Ramadan is almost over, so we fast forwarded to the end of the month now. The special month will end soon. George and the man search the sky to catch a glimpse of the new moon. "There it is," George points. He found it, a thin crescent shining bright. "There it is," George points, a thin crescent shining bright. Tomorrow is the Eid festival, the celebration of the end of Ramadan. But the celebration will start tonight. Kareem gives George a gift. "New clothes for Eid," he says. It's a fancy vest for George, and for the man, a yellow fez. Happy Eid! The holiday is here. The mosque is very busy and loud, and everyone's dressed in their finest. What a good-looking crowd. George greets Kareem with a hug and spends the day with his friend. After hours of fasting and fun, their sad Eid has to end. But soon it's time to go home. As the moon returns to the skies, George thinks of his first Ramadan and closes his eyes. It's Ramadan, Curious George. And for all of us curious folks who aren't Muslim, it's a great opportunity to learn more about the holiday and to wish a happy Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak is a traditional greeting for those in your life who are celebrating.